Aloha, what is up, my beautiful people? Yeah, I know it's Sunday. The release schedule is going to be moved back one day for personal reasons. Anyway, what shall we talk about today? As much as I hate Flat Earth, I actually feel like making a video on it this time. Yep, the sun is rising from the west today. Who would have thought? If you remember the channel Odd TV, they released a new video that interested me, so we're going to have a quick look.
There's this one video where the actor is going around a corner and he is faded out before making it completely out of the viewer's sight.
Wow, that is truly some spooky shit. Where did the astronaut? I don't recognize it since I'm not really the Ternako spooky type to watch videos from the ISS, but it seems... Okay, I don't know where this footage is from. It's kind of clear that the footage is edited. I mean, look, why would the footage editor here bother to edit this person exiting with most of his body already behind that wall of computers and wires, and then at the very last moment decide, nah, I'm too lazy to do the last few pixels, so we'll just fade him out. I mean, even as he's fading, his body continues to move out of the screen. This editor's job is literally done and he decides to fade the astronaut. At the very least, they could cut the footage. You flat earthers are here thinking that NASA is trying to do this huge cover-up and are somehow doing a bad job of it. If there truly was this huge conspiracy, you bet they're not going to make stupid mistakes like fading out an astronaut in a public video. That's just so dumb.
Let's not forget space bubbles.
So many times during spacewalks outside the International Space Station, we can see air bubbles rising up. Can you touch on how there are air bubbles in space?
Can you be more specific? Air bubbles?
So yeah, like a lot of times during the footage, the NASA footage, you can see bubbles coming up out of the helmets or kind of from underneath you. How do you explain bubbles in space?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about.
Alright, so he shows a lot of footage here and we don't need to watch them all. Space bubble, huh? As much of an intuitive name that is, it's not an official closely at these so-called space bubbles, actual nor scientific term whatsoever. Before at first, I wouldn't think these are bubbles at all. I know I get to the actual explanation, why don't we look? The footage is low resolution, but would you say that's a bubble? Maybe. It seems to have an irregular shape, not like the round bubbles you would see on Earth. Now that opens up the possibility of this being many different things. It could be debris from anything, or it could be water. What it can't be, however, are bubbles. In space, there is no air pressure on the outside, which means any air pressure from the inside is going to be overwhelming and the bubble will pop. But I doubt anyone is stupid enough to think these are actual bubbles. Anyway, the flat earthers are saying that because there are bubbles here, this footage couldn't have been taken from space. And for that, I say you're wrong. First, that would assume these are actual bubbles. You're using the word space bubbles without actually verifying what they are in an attempt to deceive the audience. But in reality, that's not what they are. Now, if they were truly bubbles, that shit is hard to control, and if they can, this is not being filmed in space, just film this and release just one or two bubbles, that water on Earth, then there would be a lot more bubbles. It's an insane task to accomplish already. So what is this thing then? A likely explanation is that this is just random debris that flies into space. That's not a very satisfying answer, but bear with me. There's a reason we only see these so-called space bubbles from astronauts who are next to or halfway inside an open hatch. That's because this is where the debris originates from. When you open a hatch, the air inside is going to be sucked into the outside space. When this happens, it can bring any dust or particles along with it. So that's likely what you see in these videos. The bubbles are in reality really small debris that flies out from the pressure difference. They originally resided inside the hatch but got sucked out. Now, if you want to falsify this, feel free to show me a video of a so-called space bubble that does not originate from a hatch. Now, there's also a second likely explanation here, and this one is a bit more when air escapes into space, such as when they are interesting, and that's that they're water. Not the astronaut opens the hatch, some very interesting bubbles, but water. There's a difference. See, interesting things happen. The air expands out into the nothingness, and because it expands, it also cools down extremely rapidly. Now, when that happens, the water vapor mixed in with that air will quickly freeze, forming liquid water and ice crystals, which then float out into space due to the vacuum. Either of these explanations are reasonable, although the first is more likely to be true for the specific types of footage shown here. You can falsify either of these by showing that the space bubbles appear in areas not near the hatches. I'll just sit here and wait patiently for that. The final explanation I can think of is that water leaks out from the spacesuit somehow. I'm not familiar with the design of spacesuits, so why don't we look into the next clip to find out more about that.
Dave Williams about to move out of the Quest airlock. Those particles that you see emanating Officer Paul Baim in Mission Control from the airlock to be particles of water is said by the EVA from the crew's sublivators on their spacesuits.
Well, would you look at that? You actually included a clip in your own video where they actually explained what it is. In that one specific footage, can't speak for the rest of them, it seems that the so-called space bubbles are water from the crew's sublimators on their spacesuits. It's so funny how you decided not to cut that out. I mean, at least offer a counter-explanation. What, are you used to only other flat earthers watching your videos that you think you can get away with not explaining it?
Oh, and it just happens that actors train in an underwater tank.
Yes, they do, because the feeling of being in space like a zero-gravity situation here on Earth is very similar to that of being inside. One is to drop the trainees on a small aircraft in an underwater pool. There are a few ways to simulate and have them free float. Another is to put them underwater in a pool. Here, if you see the pool footage, look at how many bubbles there are that escapes. It's basically impossible to prevent all of that from being in the footage. Good luck explaining that one.
NASA tells us that the Earth is photoshopped because it has to be.
It is photoshopped, but it has to be.
I don't know how many times flat earthers are going to refer to that specific audio clip. Like I've explained multiple times in previous videos, photos of the Earth have to be photoshopped because of difficulties actually capturing the entire thing in one photo image. If you're an astronaut floating in the ISS around the Earth, you'll never be in a view where you can just snap the entirety of the Earth. If you're far away, like all combined means you have to Photoshop to get an accurate on the moon or something, the Earth is often shadowed your picture of the entire Earth. They usually do it and you can't see the whole thing anyway. These factors do this by piecing together multiple images taken at different times. Otherwise, it'd be impossible. Is this honest? Absolutely not, especially since there aren't many other options out there. But that doesn't mean full images of the Earth don't exist. Here's one taken by the Apollo 17 mission in 1972. Now, you can cry all you want about this one being fake, but your argument would hold no water if you don't do anything else but cry.
Some NASA actors say that you can totally see stars when you're in space.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
Pretty much all the time.
All the time.
You can see the stars.
It's not a black.
Cool. See the stars.
Oh void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
You see the gas Magellan clouds of Milky Way
you see
galaxy.
The Magellanic Cloud.
Magellanic. See, I just wanted the Magellan
there's a large
clouds.
one and a small one, right?
Yeah.
And then you can see the zodiacal light.
Whoa. But the NASA actors from 1969 say that you can't see the stars in space.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon.
Looking into deep space means you can't
remember seeing any.
Context is important to see stars, especially if you're looking away from your little shit, especially if you're in space from the Earth and the Sun. But it's different if you're on the moon. The astronauts of 1969 said specifically they can't see the stars from the lunar surface on the daylight side of the moon. If you're on the daylight side of the moon, of course you wouldn't be able to see stars because it's way too lit up around you. Your eyes will just adjust to the daylight moon surface and you wouldn't be able to see stars. It's kind of like when you're on Earth. You can't see stars during the day, but during the night they become visible as long as there isn't too much light pollution around. Of course, even at night, if you live in a big city and a lot of street lights, you wouldn't really be able to see the stars either. And that's because there's too much light around. Similarly, if you're on the daylight side of the moon, you wouldn't be able to see the stars due to too many other sources of light being present. This is especially the case if you are trying to photograph it because the light sensitivity on the camera
Earth orbits
would also adjust accordingly.
Right. NASA says that we can't leave low.
Now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go.
If you think the firmament exists and is preventing us from going any further, I would love to see some evidence of the existence of this firmament, because so far I only see flat earthers claim it exists without even trying to prove it. It's difficult for us to escape Earth's orbit right now because we currently don't have the technology to do so, and it's not like the technology from 1969 are readily available. In order to plan a mission to a further destination, we would have to create spacecraft specifically for that, and so far there isn't much reason to do so. There's the colonization of Mars project, but other than that, there's no reason to go beyond Earth's orbit. orbit, such as to the moon again. If NASA really wanted to, I'm sure they can make it happen easily. So to reiterate myself, the rockets and spacecrafts have to be built and one that flies into free space. We currently look for that kind of mission because just having something only don't have such spacecrafts and there's very little orbit around Earth is much different than the incentive to make them. But once we do want to make them, they have to be affordable and cheap. Anyway, that's my time, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I would like to give a shout out to Fireshar, Liam, Don Jessica, Joe Goldenberg, and JN. My thanks also extends out to Hawk, Rick Klenn, Chris Britton, Dave Osler, Tom Schaefer, Landers, Aided Furball, and Philip Costopoulos, as well as every other person who are currently supporting me on Patreon. I will see you in the next video.